Hello everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us for this session. I am Siman and I have Ashwini with me from the Swiggy Insights team today. Hi. Okay, so today we are going to talk about a couple of things that we have done, a couple of tweaks that we have done in the existing research methods. And these innovations have really helped us make the insights more relevant for the business teams. There are before we get into the solutions itself, we wanted to first talk about why these innovations were required in the market, right? And hence we wanted to share the need of innovation. So today, especially for e-commerce companies, there are a lot of data signals which are available in the market, where from which we understand what are the consumer trends, how are the consumers reacting to changes in the external world, what are the things which are affecting them. But for us or for the business to actually leverage these trends, we need to understand or decode the whys behind these trends, these changes in trends, etc. Right? And this is where we come in and we try to understand why these changes are happening, and hence what are the things that the business has to do, right? Now, to understand this better, there are four key things that are required today. First one is read the primary research data or the data we get from qualitative, quantitative sort of studies, along with behavioral data of how consumers are actually, making purchases or doing their, purchases on the app or offline, right? Second important thing is capture the insight as close to the moment of truth as possible. Make it as real time as possible. Right? Both of these things are important to understand what the consumer emotion is when they're going through the journey and how that translates in the action that they're taking. Right. Third one is there are more and more new techniques developed, or with the advent of new technology, there is scope of reducing the turnaround time for the project, the research that we do, and also use this technology to make the insights more and more accurate, or more and more closer to the reality. Right? And both of these things, being agile and being technology driven, are important for us to have better research methods. And this is what we have done to actually make insights more impactful for the business. Right? There are two solutions that we are going to talk about today. First one is the agile framework for comms testing, and second was consumer digital pulse. We've chosen the reason for choosing these two particular initiatives is mainly because the first one talks about how the consumer thinks when we are communicating something to them. What is their mindset? What are the things that they're thinking of, and how does that impact the message that we're trying to give them? And second one is why are the consumer trends coming up the way that they are? Right? And what are the things which are driving or shaping the consumer trends? So both of these initiatives actually cover the how and why for the consumer, and becomes relevant for other categories also to see how this is actually making impact, right? So this is basically sharing these two solutions with you. The first one, I'll take you through the agile framework for comms testing, and then Ashwini would take you through the consumer digital parts. Getting into the solution, first we need to understand why there are changes required in the existing comms testing frameworks or the methods that we are using for it. The first one being that communication today is just not just about marketing the brand, it's also about communicating other changes, for example, changes in policies, new services that are there in the market, or if you're upgrading your app or your features in the app, etc. All of these are important to be communicated with the consumer because they play a role in how the consumer would make the purchase. Right. So first thing is this change has to be the communicated, and there is a larger scope of why communication is used. Second, even the channels that are used for communication, those there are new channels that have been added to it. Examples like emails, push notifications, etc. One of the most critical channels that has been added, especially for e-commerce players, is in-app communication. And what's important to understand here is, in television or digital communication, you get a time frame from the consumer to communicate your message. But within an app, you get only 8 to 10 words to communicate what you want to share with the consumer or make them understand or educate them on a particular topic. And it's really important for us to test that content before we put it to the app so that it really makes an impact. Right? Second one is do these changes or communicate these insights to the consumer, to the business teams or product teams as per the product development cycle. It's really important to work with that time frame and be really agile so that these changes can actually make an impact in the market. Third one is more focus on noticeability. So earlier in the comms test that we have been doing so far, the focus was on comprehension, persuasion, and relevance. Noticeability came in from an angle of the ad being clutter breaking. But in the digital world or inside the app, noticeability becomes even more important because the consumer really scrolls through things really fast. And if your content is not attention worthy, people would just skip through it and it would not be able to make a impact. Lastly, the methodology that you use should be equally good with online and offline methods. We really understood the importance of this when offline interviews were not happening because of the COVID situation, and all the work that we were doing went online. The methods that have developed, or the agencies that we have been working with, they have developed or adapted these methods online, and it has worked beautifully for us. This also gives us more flexibility and opportunity to engage more with the stakeholders, make them involved in the studies that we are doing, so that they get first-hand information from the consumer, and if there are any tweaks basis the business requirements, we can on the go do it. Now, talking about the solution in particular, there are certain things that we kept in mind while making tweaks in the existing comms testing modules. First one being understanding the landscape of the service or feature as well while building or refining comms for it. It's important to understand the mindset and emotion of the consumer when we are trying to communicate something to them, right? And this is what we're trying to do with this particular segment in the research here. We'll see an example of this in the next few minutes. Second one being combining observation with real time or with the primary data that we get from qualitative and quantitative research. This essentially helps us understand what the consumer is thinking when they're doing a particular task, and then what is the impact on the action that they take. Next one, to make this observation, we need to have stimulus across channels. So if it's a television ad, we'll have stimulus of a real-time reel where the ad would come in between, which is the normal way of testing clutter breaking ability. And then if it's an app, we'll create a prototype of the particular communication and put that in the app so that the person can do a task and we can understand if the person is actually noticing the communication or not. Next one is being adaptable, which we saw earlier, shifting to the online method of doing interviews. And lastly is we're trying to make it more and more modular, more and more comparable across different initiatives. Now that we have started using it across other services, we're trying to make it as modular as possible so that we can reduce the time further and it becomes a plug and play sort of a research that we do in a couple of weeks for the stakeholders. We'll take an example of the recent changes that we have done in the cancellation policy, the communication, how the communication shaped up for it. In this communication test, first we wanted to understand, or first we wanted to create a baseline for solutioning what the consumer is actually thinking when they're doing different types of cancellation and what is the emotion behind it. Basis that the communication tone has to be modified so that we're able to talk to the consumer at the same level as they are. So if the consumer is annoyed after deciding to cancel something or is going to cancel a particular order, then the tone should be soothing, should be calming, so that we can arrest the anxiety of the consumer and then talk to them with a solution for whatever issue they're facing. Second challenge is that if there is a change in cancellation policy, it has to be communicated before the consumer places an order. But at that moment, consumer actually is not looking out for a communication on cancellation. It's not something that they want to pay attention to, and you have to make a communication that brings that attention to this fact. So with these two challenges, we moved ahead after understanding the landscape of how cancellations are done by consumers. Two elements that I'm going to talk about today are both in-app communication that we had tested. First one being the pop-up message, which is shown once to the consumers when they come onto the cart page while placing an order. Here, if they read through and they press "I understand," then this is the purpose of the pop-up, where we're assured that person has at least seen this policy. But what we understood in the research is people are just clicking "I understand" without reading the full content, and later on the comprehension was really seriously getting impacted because they were not sure of the complete content of the pop-up. Three things that were noticed in the research and basis which revised the content that you see right now on the right hand side. First one, make the content conversational. Second, communicate the policy. And third, put a reason why this is important for the consumer. Right. So instead of a plain communication of the policy that within 1 minute you'll get free opportunity to cancel for free, and after that there would be a charge, you have to use these three tenets to revise this content within the same number of words so that the intended message is communicated properly. Right. Next example is the message that we show just below the billing information on the cart page. Now, this is a message which is shown repeatedly to the consumer with every order, and there are chances that consumers might get irritated with seeing the same message again and again of why are you, telling me about the policy again and again. So what we did was we put a jumping ticker here, where if the person clicks on it, then there would be the content which you see on the right hand side. That content would pop up where it's a little more attractive. You have icons there which signify what the statement is, and all the tenets are explained properly so that there are no confusions about the policy before the person places the order. And if you have read it a couple of times and you don't want to click on the ticker, this content would not appear. So you're using the real estate on the app in a justified manner, and you're also steering away from irritating the consumer by showing the same communication again and again. Right. Likewise, there were changes done across the communication that we use across different channels. And this led us to then refine communication, do a pilot, and then do a national launch mid of this year. The impact of this has been really great. We have been able to improve on the unit economics because of lower number of cancellations. And now this is the way this is the framework that we use across different initiatives to test communication going forward. So this is just one example of how certain improvements in the existing methods, basis technology and modular approach can reduce time, make the outputs better, and help the business in a better manner. The next solution that we're going to talk about today is Consumer Digital Pulse, and I'd like to hand it over to Ashwini to take us through it.
Hey, hi, Siman. Thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you all are doing well and keeping safe. So, I will be walking you through the second piece that is primarily aimed to cover the softer nuances of the consumer life. To begin with, let me share the context which led to the shaping of this digital initiative. The onslaught of COVID-19 triggered uncertainties, right? And it kind of had far-reaching implications on a gamut of things. All of this changed how consumers were responding, reacting to the crisis, and at the same time adapting to the new normal and new routines. While there was an organic increase in online purchases, as we all saw, the food category, specifically the online food delivery category, was quite witnessing the opposite trend. There was a drastic change happening in the way consumers were interacting with our platform, their habits towards food, their perception toward food delivery. All of this was undergoing and evolving continuously, and this seemed to be having kind of rapid effect on our business as well. Swiggy was one of those few businesses actually that went down to as low as 20% of their volumes at that point of time. So, on the surface, it seemed to be that there were two tasks to be done. One was to ensure safer deliveries, communicate trust to consumers, be it food or the grocery deliveries that we were doing. And the second part to it was to ensure all of this without compromising on the customer experience. Now, the understanding of what is happening with the category was coming in real quick. But the real deal was to decode the whys and go beyond the surface. Understanding the mindset, tensions, motivations, how is the daily routine really changed versus pre COVID? All of these were the questions that were there on our minds. And there was more to this unexpected behavior change that met the eye. So, in addition to the internal data, we had to bring in the depth of the external interactions. We were already online with a lot of researchers in Swiggy, but post pandemic, there was an opportunity that we saw to accelerate and leverage newer ways, newer technologies, partners that probably got and adapted, partners that adapted to this entire pace of work, and those who encouraged non-compromised consumer feedback. And one of this was Consumer Digital Pulse. So, what is really Consumer Digital Pulse, right? The way I describe it is, first of all, it is an in the moment process, also expanded to say observe, track, probe kind of consumer interaction. And it's executed by leveraging different online platforms. Now, it's a two pronged approach. The first one being the digital diary. Digital diary is the traditional diary which is adapted to the online platform with a few tweaks to the way you interact with the consumer. You recruit the consumer to get engaged via the digital platform. Digital platforms can actually be WhatsApp, your online communities, or if you're working with your partner, the partner has a proprietary tool. And this is done for a set period of time. Now, the set period of time can be as low as 1 day, or you can actually observe the behavior over a period of time, all from the comfort of your home. Wherein a moderator, again, keeps in touch with the consumer. You can be a participant to it and watch the consumer behavior by way of different tasks and friendly nudges, so that the conversation keeps is more or less engaging with them, and gather the in moment data by address for that kind of addresses your project objective. At the end of the set period, the most responsive members of the group are contacted again. This is to expand and probe further on certain info areas of your interest, which you probably kind of saw when you were interacting with the consumers in the first phase. And so you can firm up your insights. So the approach, therefore, not only studies behavioral moments of the consumers in time, but also allows you to magnify those moments and kind of, probe in more with the consumers. Now, thanks to smartphones and tasks such as video diaries, photo uploads, you can now peek into the lives of the consumers without physically being, present with them. This process, as we saw it, was discreet, it was fast, it was engaging, and it was flexible. And thus, we started to capture and assess behavior and reactions, which were the softer behavioral aspects of consumers as they happened. Now, before I take you all to my example of what and how, what are the examples that we used, Consumer Digital Pulse to kind of bring in more value, let me list out the principles that we keep in mind while doing the Digital Pulse. First one being keep small goals. When I say keep small goals, start with linear objectives, singular objectives, so that your consumers are not loaded with a lot of things to come back to you, or a lot of questions that kind of, makes that kind of fatigues them out to be a part of that entire process. Next, make the task surrogate to direct questioning. Again, try and make it as engaging as possible. Remember, we are sitting on the in the digital world where attention span is quite small. So try and make tasks which are engaging and not really ask them what did you do, why did you not do. Let there be an observational pattern rather than intrusive questioning pattern. Also, the task you choose will set the tone for the study and will potentially affect the engagement levels, like I've told you. Next one, which is a personal recommendation from my side, is keep taking a stock of consumer responses and behaviors periodically. This will allow you to do any tweaks in the approaches if they are required, or any probes that might be required later, or even in the course of the day, or in the course of days that you're observing the consumer, you can kind of change the modules, you can change the tasks to kind of achieve what you're trying to achieve from this entire process. And finally, supplement this with the in-depth interview, like I said before, This will help you magnify the moments. This will help you magnify the consumer behavior and also try and understand what was going behind the consumer's mind when he was doing a particular activity. Now, so with these guiding principles in mind, we've largely been successful at driving actionable insights. The model is working so far really well for us. And here are the broader reasons that I'd like to list down. First being consumer comfort and convenience. In India, majority of consumers are familiar with most of these digital platforms. So they are confident to use these to express themselves. Simplicity also further, adds to faster recruitment. So you don't have to kind of buffer in a lot of time for consumer recruitments to happen unless your criteria are really stringent. Uh, and this also keeps conversations fluid. This is an environment where consumers mostly feel at home because it's non-intrusive, and so it fits into the people's life while they are doing certain other activities simultaneously. It's not like a dedicated time that they have to show up, but they can simultaneously do this activity because it's an observational process that we are kind of inclined to invest in. Next, you can execute multiple consumer interactions simultaneously, which kind of brings in scale, allowing recruitments to also be done at the most micro level or micro cluster level to the umbrella cohort that you want to go to. Otherwise, in a traditional world, this entire process, as we all know, could be expensive as well as time consuming. Interestingly, also fewer pop-offs, given the comfort of the natural device, and the whole process, again, like I said, was being non-intrusive. Next one, which is an important to my mind, is it's shareable with stakeholders. You give access to your shareholders, and they can actually view these consumer, observations at their convenience. In traditional methods, again, we saw the primary limitation that happens. Even if people, if your stakeholders want to attend, they are not allowed to attend, or they are not able to attend, because there is a set limitation to the number of people that can enter a consumer's house, or even the room where we are interviewing a consumer, the number of people who can view it. So with Digital Pulse, the virtual walkthrough actually becomes easy, and it can be shared from one to many. Stakeholders can now appreciate the first-hand information that they receive from this process. The next point is actually linked to the point that I just spoke. Accessibility also helps insight function to influence business decisions with evidence based observation, because most of them have gone through it, because most of them have a record of the observations. It just becomes easier to kind of disseminate the entire observation to the audience. Finally, unlike traditional method, this is not bound by geographical restriction. You can kind of recruit people at the same time from various regions, from various clusters, and of various demos. Um, so interestingly, if you're not also getting the data that you were hoping for, you can tweak things on the go, without really disturbing the entire larger timelines that you have in mind, which is like a drawback in the traditional methods. Now, with all of us operating out of homes 24 by 7, I'm sure most of our habits have changed, right? And the important one that comes to our mind is the food habits, which is actually the core of our business, the core of our category. So, I'll give you an example of the case study that we kind of used it's used in Swiggy and deployed this consumer digital pulse. So the objective of this piece was to find out what is the new food clock that is adopted by consumers in the new routines in the pandemic, and how does this routine look compared to the pre-COVID levels. We recruited consumers across a key cohort and key markets and set up the digital pulse. The tag was 1 to 2 weeks. With Digital Pulse, we were able to understand a host of things, right from food decisions to the tensions, to the motivations, to the consumption moments, and to the ones who are influencing these moments. As a result, 10 potential ordering in moments were communicated to the stakeholders. Some were the result of new routines that had set in, and a few others were amplified by COVID. Finally, we'd like to say influx of technology, crisis like COVID, will force a disruption in market research as well. And these disruption to our mind can be potential opportunities to unlock massive value to the business. But to our mind, really, the successful research innovations will always have the following three elements. First, solutions need to be flexible and modular. You have to be able to amalgamate different ways, different designs together and drive larger actionability. When you do modular approaches, the role of researchers will become extremely important in training people, in giving the science behind these approaches, and also ensuring that actionability, the implication of the entire process, is kind of very clear and very sharp in the minds of the audience. Next one is a research innovation should enable impact on more areas of business. It should not just be, just addressed to one function alone. And this is really important because going forward, as we see, more and more departments, more and more functions are going to be data driven. And so this areas, the influencing of more areas of business becomes very important. Last one, what we think is the future of research should move from an insights to a foresights role by having data from various places connect and form real time calculations that can predict consumer behavior. So with these two cases, with these two innovations that we've done at Swiggy, we've really been able to see some tangible value coming to business. And therefore, we would like to end a presentation here and would open up the floor for any questions that you may have for us. Thank you for your time.